selling products rather than services, which I was doing at that time, might give me a bit more freedom. Something clicked at me and I thought, okay, maybe this is something I can do.
Look at me, I have a Lamborghini through dropshipping. It just feels a bit too exaggerated.
And that's, by the way, that's not what I do and that's not what I am.
Yeah. Have you ever had a customer that came to you and said, well, I would love to have my product on Amazon, and you went, I'm not sure your product fits to be sold?
Yeah, I've said that more than once. Because
Vicki, thank you for joining me today.
well, thank you for inviting me.
I was trying to remember, my memory is so bad. I probably need to take something for that. I was trying to remember where we met. Did we met on matchmaker.fm?
Yes, we did.
Yes, for those that don't know, that is not a dating website.
I was about to say, you need to explain what this is.
Although it sounds like a dating website, it's not a dating website. It is a podcast host and guest matchmaking, right?
Yeah.
You are the first and only guest from there. I do get quite a few requests, but a lot of people are in US because they don't realize that the show is live in person. And also, I do a bit of background check on people. I had a couple of people that were a bit too brass for me. Let's put it like that. It's like, oh, my boss would love to come on your show, and I go in and have a look, and well, actually, they're a bit too far right type of thinking and stuff. Like, it's not really the bro cap type of podcast that I'm doing here. We're all about diversity and inclusion. Right, I'm gonna stop talking. Vicki, do you wanna introduce yourself and maybe an elevator pitch of your business?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Vicki Weinberg and I have a consultancy where I help businesses to sell their products on Amazon. That's the main thing that I do. And I also have a podcast called Bring Your Product Idea to Life, where I speak to founders of product businesses about their stories, their experiences, and importantly, what they've learned that they can share with others looking to do something similar.
That's a very awesome, proper elevator pitch. Is it an iteration, or do you usually just go with it, wing it? Because, for example, for me, I feel like I've perfected talking to people in the past about Jigsaw. What does Jigsaw do? And now the podcast. But it took me some iteration.
It's taken me a while, I think, to get there. But as you know, I've had my own podcast for a while. I've been guesting on other people's a little bit lately because I published my first book in the summer. So
Congrats.
I've been trying. Thank you.
I need a copy. Send me the link to the...
I should have brought you one. I'm so sorry. I should have brought you a book.
What's the title?
It's called Bring Your Product Idea to Life. So same as my podcast. And so since launching that, I've tried to make a bit more of an effort to speak with other people and put myself on the other side of the microphone, as it were, and not be the host and the one asking the questions all the time.
I need to do that as well. I've started talking to podcast hosts as well and joining. Actually, I'm going to a podcast. I'm going to be the guest of a podcast this evening, but it has nothing to do with businesses. So it's about filmmaking. So yeah, I need to get more into my own field as well. With your business, teaching others how to sell on Amazon, how did you get to that? Were you doing drop shipping? Were you selling specific products on Amazon and you gained that experience? How did you get into teaching others?
It's a bit of a long story, but I hope that's okay. So It was when my first baby, no, it wasn't my first baby, it was my second baby was born. So that was a whole other story. After having my second baby, I hadn't been working for a while because at that time I was running a yoga business, but because of the pregnancy, I had some issues with my hips, which meant I couldn't actually teach the yoga. So I had to get teachers to run all the classes, and I felt like I wasn't really doing very much other than sending invoices, admin. I just was a bit, I said restless sounds silly because I have a 3-year-old and a newborn, but I just wanted to do something else, but I didn't know what. And I listened to a podcast, and there was some men on there talking about how they were selling yoga mats on Amazon. This was an American podcast. They were American, and they were selling their own brand of yoga products. And they were talking about how, they had this nomad lifestyle, and they were working on their laptops by swimming pools, and they didn't need premises. And they were and so obviously that wasn't a match for my situation. But what I took from that is that selling products rather than services, which I was doing at that time, might give me a bit more freedom, especially if I can set up the business in such a way that I wasn't always the one, walking to the post office or whatever it was. Something clicked in me, and I thought, okay, maybe this is something I can do around my children while they're sleeping. The oldest is in the nursery, to make some money.
Yeah.
So I designed and launched my own brand of baby products. So they were really high quality bamboo products. And I had a Shopify store that I set up at the time. And then I also sold on Amazon, just in the UK. And Amazon, at the time, I thought it was tricky. I thought it was a hard place to get started and sell on.
It seems like to me. Although you have all of these, I use TikTok, like a lot of people. And I see so many, hey, let me tell you the secret of drop shipping. Want to do 10K a month with doing drop shipping? And I might just roll my eyes and then scroll down. One, I've always seen Amazon as being hard because there's so many products there. And two, at times these bros with their lifestyle and so on, look at me, I have a Lamborghini through drop shipping. It just feels a bit too exaggerated. Yeah, sorry, I've interrupted you.
No, don't worry at all. And that's, by the way, that's not what I do, and that's not what I advocate. Like, I like working with small businesses and founders who sell like their own products that they've developed, they're really proud of. They got great, because I think a great product is where you have to start, whether you sell on Amazon, anywhere. It has to be a great product. And I'm not saying that there aren't great dropship products, but I don't think it's the same. Like, I want to work with people who've created something and they're like really excited that this is their product, or products, and they're really excited about it, and they're passionate about it. And those are the people that I like working with. But yeah, I thought Amazon was hard. What was it, 7-8 years ago? Nothing like it is now. Now is so much harder. It gets harder. I don't know why. You feel like,
do you think dropshipping has anything to do with it? Like the fact that it's so advertised as this wonder recipe of making money, and everyone just pollutes Amazon with, reselling or just having stuff sent from China straight to customers. So everyone's making a seller profile and everyone's listing products. Do you think that has anything to do with it getting harder?
Partly, because I think that is happening. But then I think to counteract that happening, Amazon do a lot more checks than they used to of anyone setting up an account. So even that first step of getting a seller account is harder than it was when I was doing it. Right. Like, I know people who say, I can't believe, it's taken a couple of weeks just to get the account verified, because they want to verify who you are, who your business is, your back. This is all good, by the way. I think this is all good stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just some people find it frustrating, but I think it's good. I think, so that is part of it. But I think, if I'm really honest, and I feel I'm not sure if I should say this on film, but I think Amazon themselves make things harder. So the support, I think, I don't think this is a secret. You could speak to any Amazon seller. If they've ever had to contact the seller support for anything, I think they'll tell you it's pretty poor. It's really hard. A lot of what I do for clients is troubleshooting, because they get so frustrated. They just can't believe, this is a massive platform. They've got all this money. And if I have a problem, I either can't get someone on the phone, or I send an email and then I get a reply that doesn't even acknowledge an issue that I had. That's really tough for people. It's really frustrating. And I feel like it's frustrating for me as well. But because I've been doing this for so long, and I think I'm a bit of an optimist, like, I always feel like it will turn out okay in the end. I do go in with that. I'm able to solve things for people, but I feel like a lot of people are just, either they're so shocked it's so bad, they're like, I'm just going to give up because I'm never going to resolve my issue, or they just don't want to because it's hard. That is down to Amazon. I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's a cost saving thing, but the level of support you get as a seller has really gone downhill, in my opinion. I do feel scared saying that on video.
I feel that that's the case with a lot of marketplaces. Like, our business was part of a marketplace. I know of people in Salesforce that, also complain about certain things. I don't think there's one marketplace out there that's perfect in that sense. But that's like, for example, in our ecosystem, there's a lot of consultants nowadays that help vendors. Oh, here's 1, 2, 3 steps. Let's do this. Let's see what you want to achieve, how you want to sell. Let me bake you a recipe to help you with some of this stuff. And some of those people that help have been in the ecosystem for a long time and went through a lot of these challenges. Some of them have worked for the parent company, for the ecosystem company, and so on. So I don't think it's unfamiliar. And at the end of the day, it does give you a business in a sense, because people find themselves in frustrating circumstances, and you have the knowledge and the ability to help them.
Yeah. And it's a shame though, I think it's a shame that, because when I started, coming back, you asked me how I started. So when I started selling on Amazon, yes, it was hard, but I was able to figure it out and I was able to do it myself. And I still feel like you can do it yourself and figure it out, but it's not as easy as it was for me back then. But I think because I was selling on the platform for such a long time, I'm not anymore. I don't have my baby brand. I can talk about why a bit later if you like. But I think because I have just been working on there, I've just seen how it's been and I've just kind of learned with it, if that makes sense, which I think has given a bit of an advantage for me, in that I understand how it works because I'm so familiar with it.
I think also Amazon is I think for sure the biggest search engine when it comes to people shopping. And everyone would love to have their products on Amazon. And being so hard and tough is probably the reason why you can't find certain products onto there, because of the restrictions around certain things. I've never got my head around the logistics of it as well, especially with Prime, because they send you things the next day, but then how do they get the products from the vendors? Do they have to have stuff in stock in Amazon warehouses? Do vendors send them directly? It's always been mind-boggling to me. But I think that's one of the things why everyone has a Prime account nowadays. Like I've been having it for maybe 10 years.
Yeah, me too.
And people do go there to shop for things, especially things that you might think, I really want this tomorrow. Like, I really want this piece of clothing or this tool or this tomorrow. Well, where should I go? Amazon. But I suppose, does that also give you an influx of customers? Because, you get people that, they really want their product on Amazon. Is that part of your customer strategy? Often it's like, we're going to launch this product or this brand of products. Big part of our strategy is Amazon selling.
Yeah, I mean, some of the brands I work with have been selling for a long time, and getting on Amazon is like a new part of their business, either because they're looking to reach more customers, or maybe because it's a product that kind of, they know they should be on Amazon. Because like you say, there are certain things where, I mean, I sometimes go to Amazon, I search for something by the brand name because I know the exact thing that I want, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll get it on Amazon. And often the reason those businesses aren't on Amazon is because of all the barriers we've mentioned before, and maybe they need some support to get on there. And I will say though, because I think I should say this, I still don't think Amazon is right for every business and every product. I was
going to ask, did you ever had a customer that came to you and said, well, I would love to have my product on Amazon, and you went, I'm not sure your product fits to be sold there?
Yeah, I've said that more than once. Because I just believe in being honest. I would never say don't do it. It's not me to tell you how to run your business. But I have definitely said to people, you know what, I'm not sure if this is the best fit. By all means, of course, if you make the decision to do it. However, my advice would be that maybe you would look at Etsy or a different marketplace, because there are some products where it just doesn't make sense, partly because of the type of the product, but also sometimes because of the margins, because that's something that businesses aren't always aware of, is what it will cost to sell on Amazon. And if your margins are already small, it kind of depends why you're there. If you're there because you want to get more volume, some people say it's okay, I can take a hit on my margin, and because I'll get more brand awareness and I'll get more customers, and maybe then more people will come to my website, and they've got like a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
But for others, if cash flow is really important, often, not always, but depending on the product, there's so many variables. But for some people, selling on Amazon can be more expensive than selling on their own website. In fact, for a lot of people.
And I think you hit an important point there as well. If you can't produce volumes, let's say you're doing this type of Etsy custom made product or something that you make manually, is it worth you listing on Amazon? Are you going to be able to fulfill those orders if you can't hold a lot of stock in? I think, I don't know, maybe that's one challenge as well. That makes sense. Well, I wanted to ask about your history in the entrepreneurship realm. You said that you had a yoga business before before
my product business.
Before your product business. Was there anything before that in terms, or you coming from a professional world, or have you been an entrepreneur for as long as you know?
No, I came from a corporate role. So I worked in corporates for a long time. I worked in the oil and gas industry for about 10 years, had a very good role. Then I fell pregnant the first time. And then after my first son was born, I had postnatal depression. And the plan was I would take a year's maternity leave and go back after a year. I didn't know, obviously, I was going to have postnatal depression or any of this. And I hadn't anticipated, because you can't know before you have a child. My plan was I take a year off with the baby, have a year's maternity leave, which I got through the company. That I know that's a really generous maternity package. I was very lucky. And then the idea was I would go back maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and my baby would be in nursery, and that was the plan. And then I had him, and that wasn't the reality. The reality was I struggled, I was unhappy. I didn't know I had postnatal depression, first of all. I just thought I was a bit sad, I was adjusting, but I wasn't in a good place. And I finally started to, towards that end of that first year, I was starting to feel better in myself. But then when the question of going back to work came up, it almost set me back a little bit, because I suddenly had this thing of, I don't think I want to go and work in an office 4 days a week. I don't think I want to drop my baby at nursery at 7 a.m. and pick him up at whatever time and be in London, which is, it's okay, it's only half an hour on the train, but the physical, distance from, I don't know, there was a lot of things that came up, and I just thought, I don't think this is what I want. I don't think I want to leave my child, that physical, for the time, and also physically be far away from him. And I just felt like this isn't what I want. I don't want to do this. And then when I started having conversations with work about going back, I also felt a bit like, I don't know, they weren't as supportive as they could be, because I was saying, okay, could I go back 3 days a week, but maybe have 1 day at home, to try and almost compromise. But it was, we want you back 4 days a week. And it just got to the point where I just thought, you know what, I'm just not going to go back, because it's not, it just didn't feel right. I didn't like that. I felt like I was being pushed to do more than I wanted to do, that I was comfortable with, making decisions, very soon.
Was this, I suppose this was before the pandemic?
Yes, so this would have been 2014. And in the role that I was doing, I had worked remotely a lot, because I was working in London. So during 2012, when the Olympics was on, I worked most of that summer remotely, because they didn't want people coming into the office, because there were so many people pouring into London. So working remotely was definitely possible. It was something that, had been proven.
Yeah.
But I was told, no, you can't do that. You need to be in the office. You need to doing more hours. And I kind of knew, I had a sense as well, and I'm very deliberately not naming the company, because I had a sense if I did go back based on what I'd seen from others in the same situation, however many days I came back for, I was always going to be working more because that was the nature of it. And
that has been the challenge. And I think if this would have happened, maybe not, maybe yes, but if this would have happened post-pandemic, I feel that the world is a bit of a different place now, and a lot of companies are a lot more I mean, it depends on what company we're talking about, but some companies are a lot more accepting of just taking the role completely remote, or just coming in once every couple of weeks or things like that. But I remember the same thing. It was back then, 2014, 15, 16. It was just, well, why can I not work? Why can I not have flexible working hours? Why can I not work from home more? It's like, just because those are our rules. That's okay, silly rules, because I can do my job from home. You gave me a laptop for a reason, right? Is this a common occurrence, postnatal depression?
I don't know for sure. I've never looked up the stats, but I would assume so. Yeah, I would imagine that. Yeah, it sounds maybe naive that I don't know, but I would say yes, and I would probably say even more so than we know, because I never kind of, there's probably no statistic that I had postnatal depression. Because actually what do they call them? The midwife who came to see me never didn't pick up on it. It didn't get picked up for a very long time, partly because I think I was hiding it, which sounds so silly, because I was a bit embarrassed of it, and I don't know why. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't speak up more. I don't know why I didn't ask for help more. I don't know why. I really don't know why. So I think it's very common, but I think maybe not all women are speaking about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the support out there is like now. So from other companies, for example, because my company were aware of it. And I'd like to think that now mental health, all aspects of mental health, people talk about more. I feel like people are more open about it.
Yeah.
That I'd like to hope there is more support than there was 10 years ago.
I think it is. Just looking at at least the digital world, the internet, it seems people talk a lot more about this, and there's a lot more support systems in place in organizations. How much time did it took you to realize what's going on? Because I suppose, like you said at the beginning, you are a bit ashamed. You didn't knew why you feeling the way you're feeling.
I think, to be honest, it was my husband saying it to me constantly that kind of, eventually it sunk in. But it took a long time. But if I'm honest, I think I did sort of know, but I just didn't. I don't know why. I just didn't want to admit that to myself. I don't know whether it was I didn't want to admit that I was struggling, or that I wasn't finding having a baby that easy. I don't know what it was. I couldn't even tell what it was. Actually, I definitely think there are things from that first year that I don't remember so well. So my husband will sometimes say about something and I'll be like, I don't remember that. I don't remember that happening. Partly, I think as well, I was tired. We had a baby that didn't sleep, and I was constantly tired, which is also
It was your
not
first
great.
baby as well, so it's a shock in terms of the changes in your life and schedule and everything,
and hormones and sleeping, and there's so much just gets turned completely upside down, and I think no one can ever prepare you for it, but I was definitely not. But like I said, I went into it thinking, I'll take maybe 9 months off, but probably a year, and then I'll go back, and I had all this planned out because I don't want to say I was naive, because you don't know what you don't know, but I had no idea how hard it was all going to be.
I'm asking because I'm wondering whether not wanting to accept the state, whether that was because you're a bit ashamed of it. Like, I don't want to admit that I feel like this, because I don't want people to think that there's something wrong with me, because people have kids, give birth, and it's supposed to be like a happy moment in my life? Or was it because you've always tried to be resilient around things and push through and so on? And the reason why I'm asking is 100% not the same thing. Like, I don't even want to compare it. But I've had situations where I fell into a bit of a downer. You see, even that, I find it even hard to say depression, because I don't know, and sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not depressed. Like, I'm strong. I'm this. And for me, it's always been not necessarily shame to admit it to others. Because when I get an injury or something, I'm just such a crybaby to Nick, and I'm like, oh, look at me, help me. But I think it was more my own mind thinking, no, this is not happening. Like, I'm gonna get over it. Like, I'm strong, I'm resilient, and so on. So that's why I was asking what was kind of going on through at that point. But it's also quite hard to, when these things happen and they pass, to kind of have a retro with yourself and figure out what that was at that point.
Yeah, I would say that I think it's the second one, because I've always been resilient, and I've always been someone who, I said earlier, I was very optimistic, and I am, and I do genuinely believe there's a solution to everything, and I'm like that person who always look for a solution.
Me too,
And that's just how I've always been. So I think part of it probably was, I think, that I didn't want to admit that there was a problem that I didn't know what to do about, because for anything else that's either gone wrong or if I've had to adapt, I'm not saying things haven't been hard, but I've usually been pretty good at going, okay, this has happened, I'll do this and it'll be better, or whatever it is. And I feel like and I'm not always good at asking for help. That's the other thing. I'm not great at saying I need help with this. It takes quite a lot for me to ask. Even with stupid like day-to-day stuff, like, keeping the house tidy. I'm not the best at, I let it build up and then get really cross and go, somebody needs to put all this away or whatever. I'm not, I take on a lot because I just feel like I'm capable and I can take on a lot. So I know, and I've probably done that with my business as well. I think we were talking before we recorded about the fact that I outsource some things now. Yeah. But I think like everything that I outsource, I've done it at the point where it had to be done or it wouldn't be done anymore. Do you know what I mean? I've never been very strategic and gone, do you know what? I could free up X amount of hours by giving this work to someone else. I've waited until it's got to the point where I'm like, I can't cope. Someone else needs to do this. And then I've done it. I'm not the best at that.
We were talking before recording about virtual assistants and people to help with unload stuff. And I mentioned that I'm struggling with that, and I'm just now starting to unload, because when it comes to a company thing, when it comes to stuff that you've been there, done that, it's easier to figure out how to lay it all down and delegate and distribute. So, if I start a software company, I know who to hire and where to position them. But for my own personal things, I'm doing these tasks, I'm doing these things, it feels very alien to me to hand that over. So, and it's also, up until recently, like yourself, I've been, no, I need to do it. It's my thing. It's my responsibility. No one can do it better than me.
I was about to say, is there a part of you that's like, I do this better than anyone else? But I feel like there's something really nice in going, do you know what? I'm not the expert in this, and I'm going to pay someone who is. Like, the first time I felt that, the first thing I ever outsourced was my accounting, because I'm not great at the number side of thing. I'll fully admit it's just not my strong point. And I felt such a relief to find someone who could do that, who liked doing that, who was good at that, and to say, do you know what? I'm going to pay you to do that so I never have to think about it. And that feels so nice. And I feel like the more I've started to let things go, the more I see possibilities to let other things go. So my podcast editing, for example, it's not a job I've ever enjoyed. I did it for a long time because I couldn't afford to do anything else, and also because I wanted to know how to do it myself. But as soon as I was in a position where I was like, do you know what? I looked at the numbers and went, I think I could afford now to pay someone else to do this. It just felt such a relief. It's so nice. And what I would love to do going forward, because I think as a business owner, this would be smarter than what I have been doing, is to go, okay, what are the things I don't like doing? What are the things that I don't have to do? And proactively take them off my plate now, rather than waiting to that crunch point where you're like, there are not enough hours in the week. I think that's one of my goals for next year, is to be really smart and go, okay, what don't I need to be doing? Because otherwise, running a business when it's just you can never grow beyond a certain point, because I've told you I've got kids, so there's only so many hours I have in my day, my week to work. I don't want to work all hours. Because
how much time do you spend on work?
It depends. So I try and work school hours. So when my children are at school, I try and work, and I do work a bit beyond that in the evening some days when we don't have swimming lessons or other things, because it's important to me that I still do that stuff. I might do a couple of hours on a weekend if I want to, but that's kind of, for me, I used to do more, but it's got to the point now where I'm like, if I'm going to choose to work on a weekend, it's because I'm going to choose to do it, not because I've got myself in a position where I have to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better at what I take on and managing my time and managing clients' expectations, because I want to work, I want to grow my business, I want to do the best job for my clients. But coming back to why this whole business started, it's because I wanted to be able to work around my family. And if I'm not doing that, and if I'm not seeing my kids because I'm always working, then what was the point?
And that was the yoga business. Was that the first business that you?
Yeah. So when I decided not to go back to a corporate role, I was looking for something else to do. And at that time I was looking for jobs local to me. And then I came up with, I saw this yoga, it was a children's yoga franchise that you could buy. And I've practiced yoga for years and years, since I was, I want to say, like late teens. I've always had an interest in yoga, and I'd always practiced. And so it was to teach yoga for children, and there was also baby yoga. And I was like,
baby yoga,
yeah,
interesting.
It was really cool. And I was like, it really appealed to me. And I was like, well, if I'm working with children and babies, then it's going to be hours that will work around my family, because they're only awake so long. I thought I get to train in something new, get to start to, see what it's like to run my own business. And because it was a franchise, there were good and bad sides to the franchise, if I'm really honest. The good side was that you got trained in lots of things that I wouldn't have been able to figure out. Even like, for example, the financials, you only got the basics, but you did get some training in how to run a business, because obviously the franchise owner wants you to do well, and you need to have certain skills to run the business, as well as getting trained in the yoga aspects. I also did do some basic business training. That was good. The bit that wasn't so good is, once I've been doing it for longer, I realized that they show you everything the way they want you to do it. And obviously not one thing suits everyone. So that did get frustrating after a while, when I was thinking, okay, but actually I'd really like to, try something different, or there was quite a few constraints. But what was good is that was my first experience of running my own business, albeit under this franchise umbrella, which, like I say, in some ways was good, in some ways not so good, but it was like an introduction to doing something myself. So it was, I don't regret doing it, because I think it was quite a good entry into running my own business.
And starting up, what was the most alien thing for you coming from the corporate world?
I think it was the marketing side, and having to talk about your business and promote your business, because I needed people in my classes to make money. So what I was doing is I was running private classes where mums came. I was mostly doing baby yoga classes where mums and their babies came. So I had to market those. But then for the slightly older children, I was running classes in nurseries and preschools. But to do those, you have to get in the door and convince someone to give you a shot. And that's what I found really hard. If I managed to convince someone, my strategy would be, let me do a free class for you, see if you like it. If I came and I did the free class, I would say 9 times out of 10, they booked me, because they liked me and they liked what I did. But I found it really hard. When I say I found it really hard, I found it hard to pick up the phone and ring and be like, hi, I run these yoga classes. I'd love to
Cold
come.
calling.
Yes, that's what I found really hard. It wasn't because as I say, if I got in the door, it was fine. And I don't think it was that hard. I mean, I did plenty of these trials in all, like where I live. I think most nurseries where I live, I've been to, but it was the actually picking up the phone, doing the cold calling, that I found psychologically hard, because physically it's not hard.
Yeah.
But actually to get myself in the mindset of, okay, I'm going to call some places and see if they want some yoga.
Was there ever a transition to you getting more business from word to mouth versus cold calling? I used to do freelancing, web development, website building when I came to UK. And in the early days, yes, I was on some freelancing platforms. I would call, email, and so on. I absolutely hated that. I think I've said on this podcast so many times, so I think everyone knows that I'm not the cold calling type of person. But then eventually kind of at one point flipped on where I would get reached out by people from acquaintances of customers that I already had, because this person gave me your phone number, you done their website, would love to work with you. Did that ever happen, or did you constantly had to cold call and market hard in order to get customers?
It probably happened to a small extent, but with my current business, with my Amazon consultancy, that definitely happened. And I think it was about this time last year where all the new business I was getting were recommendations and referrals, which was really, really nice and really, really good. Although the one downside for that was it meant I wasn't proactively looking for new clients myself. And I think there was a bit of a danger. So then I had a little bit of a slump, I think, at the midpoint of this year where, you work on a contract and then it ends, because I hadn't been continually marketing myself. And that's something I still struggle with now. That's probably the thing I struggled with then and now is approaching people and being like, hi, I can help you. Even though I really genuinely believe that I do a good job for people, I genuinely want to help. I think the service I offer is useful for those who need it, not everyone. I definitely wouldn't approach any old company and be like, you should be on Amazon, because I don't believe that. If I say it to someone, I say it because I believe it. I believe there's potential for them. I would never say that, I never give a hard sell, even if I'm on the phone to someone. Even if someone approaches me and says, I'm thinking of selling on Amazon, can we have a chat? I'd never give a hard sell, because I think it's not who I am. And but I still feel very uncomfortable. Even if someone approaches me and what they want to talk about it, I still feel, I don't know why that is. I'm not,
But what you said is quite interesting as well. And I actually haven't thought about this, and it's so valid, and it happens to so many people, where you go out and you learn how to sell or how to market, and you get decent at it. You start getting customers, then you start getting recommendations. You start not having to get customers because you have word to mouth and you have people coming to you, and you get a bit cold with your marketing and selling skills and so on. I'm really curious how people overcome that, because to me, if that happens to me, it feels like I'm starting from scratch. If I run out of word to mouth type of customers and I've completely left marketing aside, because when you're a one-man band, in a sense, you're more likely to, if you have an influx of customers, you're more likely to drop the things that you don't need or have time for.
Yeah.
Because anyways, if you're at full capacity of customers and so on, you don't need the extra customers from marketing and promotion and things like that. So you're more probably going to drop it. And at that point, you have a good, stable influx of customers from word to mouth. But if that stops, what do? Do you pick up the same things that you learn? Do you try a different approach to getting customers? I've never got to that point, in a sense, with my freelancing stuff, because I stopped doing freelancing development after a while, and I was still getting quite a bit of customers word to mouth.
So earlier this year, when I kind of felt that, oh, actually, I don't have much of a pipeline beyond a certain point. Like I still had work, but you can see the end in sight for some things. So it wasn't dire. It wasn't like I haven't got work, but I could start, you see the signs. Okay, I haven't got anything new yet. So I did two things. One was I actually emailed my client, my current and past clients, and asked recommendations. Anyone who hadn't recommended me or referred me recently, I thought, and it's so out of character. I said before, I hate asking people for things, but I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to ask. So I didn't say, really need work. I can't remember how I worded it, but I worded it very nicely. If you enjoyed working with me and you can recommend me, please do. Because I thought, yes, I'm relying on, people are doing that for me, but equally, it might be that there is someone knows of someone who might need my services, but it just hasn't clicked. So I thought, just remind them that I'm here is not a bad idea. And then I actually did do some cold outreach, which is something I've never, ever done. So I did do some cold emails to companies that I would love to work with. So maybe I'd seen their products and I thought their products are great. And, because I'm always interested in products because of what I do.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I might see an advertisement on the tube, or I might see something in a shop and I just think this looks really cool. And often I do go and see if they're on Amazon. So then I was approaching brands and saying, you know what, I see you're not on Amazon and I can help you. And I was also approaching companies where I'd maybe come across them on Amazon, maybe even when I'm shopping myself. And I'm like, that looks really cool, but actually their listing could be better.
Yeah.
Maybe they could be selling more. So I'm only approaching people where I genuinely feel like I could help them. I want to help them. But then I would just send them an email and say, I've seen this and I'd like to help you. And it felt really alien and like awkward. And like I said, it's not my favorite thing. But what I'm quite good at is if I tell myself I'm going to do something, I am quite good at doing things. So I think as long as I don't think about it too much, like I literally just type the email and press send about. If I overthink it, I wouldn't press send, if that makes sense. And I was surprised that people would reply and be like, yeah, I'm open to this. And even now, though, I don't know why, because I don't know about you. I get all these emails, these cold emails. Oh, I can get you more Instagram followers.
I never respond.
No, I delete them all. So I'm still baffled.
But it clearly works.
Why people are replying to me.
Yeah, but I suppose it works for those that send us those emails as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't send it. It's just that, do you reckon there's a difference, for example, from that? Someone saying, oh, get you 500K subscribers or this or that, which you see a ton of people doing, like a ton of services like this, versus what you do, because maybe there are not that many consultants and services that help companies put their products on Amazon. Do you think that that's maybe as well the reason why you get a bigger response rate?
Maybe. And maybe also because, like I said, I don't just like go through, and there isn't a phone book anymore, but it's not like I'm just going through the phone book and just firing off emails. Like I wonder if it's also that like I'm genuinely contacting companies that I think would do well on Amazon, or I see on there now and I'm like, you could be doing better and I know you could and I know how I could help you. And I wonder if it's partly that as well, because if I've identified that need, possibly they have already.
Yeah.
So, that maybe they're thinking, oh, our Amazon sales haven't been where they need to be, or we need to do this work and we haven't got time. And then they get an email from someone who says, I could help you with this. What I'm trying to say is, because I can see the need, maybe they then put two and two together.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was just blasting off emails to anybody,
like just a template rather than
then I think maybe
reaching out bespoke type of, hey, here's what I found. Your product is like this, so it worked there and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my emails are still fairly generic, but what I mean is I think because I'm only contacting people that I think I could help, there must be a percentage of people who kind of know they need that help already, but maybe they just haven't got started, or they don't know where to find someone to help. Because I think what I do is it's quite niche. Or is it? I mean, there are agencies that do similar to what I do, but not everyone. This is what I'm told, by the way. I don't know if this is, but some people that I've worked with recently have said they don't always want to work with an agency. That's nothing against agencies. It's often that maybe if they're a small business and they're a founder, they'd quite like to work with another individual rather than a company.
Right.
So that's nothing against agencies and how agencies operate. But I think some of the businesses I'm working with are very small and they're a bit, I don't know, I think they almost feel more comfortable working with me, a person with a face.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, because we used to do that quite a lot. We stayed away from large agencies and we worked with either individuals or smaller groups. I think the other thing might be, because I was thinking about it just now, if I will be launching a product, I wouldn't even know that there's help out there for publishing, for launching on Amazon. I would scratch my head and try to figure out myself, okay, Amazon, how do I do these things? How do I launch? How do I register an account, a vendor account, all of these things? So there is a chance that people might not know that there's help out there. So when you reach to them, they do plan, they have in as their roadmap to get their product on Amazon, but maybe they saw there's a bit of cumbersome, rolled their eyes and said, we'll do it later because we don't have time for it. And when you reach to them, it's, okay, so we don't need to do it ourselves internally. We can have someone help us with that. How do you know who to reach in an organization when you identify that someone could be a prospect?
If it's a very small organisation, I will often reach out to the founder. If it's, so we're talking small businesses, because I feel like if they're a very small company, this is their product. I assume, and I can, maybe not in all cases, but I always assume, okay, this is probably the person making the ultimate decision. It makes more sense for me to speak to them. And sometimes that person will come back and say, I have someone else you can speak with, but often they want to be involved, because when it's, like I say, when it's your product and you feel so passionate about it, I think you would, most people want to be involved, at least in the beginning. If it's a slightly larger business, I tend to I usually look them up on LinkedIn, if I'm honest, and get an idea of what roles there are, and then look at people's bios and say, okay, you seem to be the person that deals with e-commerce or sales, and maybe I'm getting it right, and maybe I'm not always going to be getting it right. I just have to make the best decision as to, I always feel like it's going to be someone in a sales or marketing role, or something if there's an e-commerce person. Yeah. Sometimes someone will have in their job description, they're in charge of Amazon and eBay and things like this, but I don't think there's a science to it really. I try and research as best I can, because sometimes as well, I can look at a company and I can see, okay, you already have someone. Some companies actually have someone with a job title that the Amazon account manager or whatever it is. Yeah. And then I feel, well,
you already have someone internally.
You already have someone. So, hopefully you've got that covered.
Well, I would say if the rate of you being redirected by the person that you contacted to someone else is low, then it means you're targeting the right people.
Yeah, I hope so. Also there's a certain amount of people, if you said you did cold email, there's a certain amount of people who never reply. So you don't have a clue whether you've got the right person or not. And that is a bit disheartening. But what I have started to realise is sometimes now, because I've only been doing this, I want to say less than 6 months, actually being proactive, because I was kind of like, I need to start actually going out there. Because I was on freelancing sites when I first started the business. But I came off all the freelancing sites because 2 reasons. One is that I didn't want to be paid the fees to the platform.
Yeah, charge a ton.
And then also I felt like, because you're on a freelancing site, that one thing was I feel like people wanted to pay me less for the same work than if they were hiring me via my website, because I think on some of those sites there's a bit of bidding for the lowest price, and I didn't want to get involved in that because I can't. I value my time and I've got lots of experience and expertise. I don't want to be in a bidding war really, because it has to work for me. And then I also found that when I was working people from a freelance site, not everybody, but there were definitely cases where I feel like I was being treated a bit differently because I had the title of freelancer rather than consultant or business owner. And I know that sounds silly maybe.
No, 100%. I think there's a certain type of crowd when it comes to customers that use freelancing websites. Nothing against that. In a sense, you do you. If you want to use that and have this kind of attitude, it's your way. I did have a couple of customers that were sweethearts in a sense, but I also had a lot of the majority were, I'll pay you a lot less because I've had 15 bids on my job, and customers that go there, that's what they're looking for. Basically, the best offer that they can take because they put out a job to be bidded on. And then secondly, I agree. I think it's also this stigma of, well, you're, one in a dozen freelancer, so the way I transact and interact with you is very cold. Which is, it's pretty sad to see, but I think that market has evolved in that direction, incentivized by the platforms as well.
Yes, but I just don't like it, because I sometimes use those sites to find people to do things for me occasionally, but I don't know, maybe I always treat people kindly and with respect, and I don't try and break them down on price. If someone says, I actually appreciate where someone says, this is my fixed price for this piece of work, and then I think, okay, I know what your price is and I'll pay you what you've asked for, rather than the bidding, because I don't want to engage people in that from a client side either. And I just, I don't know, being kind and respectful to people is important to me. So it was rubbing me up a bit the wrong way when I wasn't being treated with that respect. And it took a long time for me to get to that, because I quite mild really and let quite a lot of things go, but it got to the point where I was like, this isn't working for me. I don't like this, and I don't want to do it. But what's interesting is I've had people contact me recently that I'd worked with on a freelancing site, or maybe we'd spoken on a freelancing site, and they hadn't, for whatever reason, chosen to work with me. And only this week I had someone email me, because they managed to, I don't know how they managed to track me down. Maybe they remember my name. My surname's quite unusual, and they've contacted me directly. And that's actually been quite nice. And the same with, we were talking about the cold emails. I've had people contact me recently where I sent them an email maybe 4 months ago, and then they never replied, and then they'll email me now and say, oh, can you help me? As if I only emailed yesterday. Oh yeah, can you help with this? So I think, while it can feel really disheartening to be putting yourself out there all the time, hopefully it pays off in the long run.
Do you do nudges? Like after your first email, do you do follow-ups?
Yeah, I do some follow-ups. I do follow up, and then maybe leave it a couple of months and then just check in again. And it's all, I'm sighing, because it's not, you can probably tell it's not my favourite thing. It's one of those things that maybe at some point I should outsource. But then also I'm reluctant to, because I feel like one of the things I think that makes my business mine is that it is me. Like, I'm the one that talks to clients, I'm the one that does the work.
Yeah.
And I kind of, like the fact that people know they're speaking to me, because often that's feedback I get is, oh, I chose to work with you because I met you or spoke on Zoom or whatever. People sometimes like having a person. And I feel the same as well. If I'm looking to hire someone, I would much rather hire a person than a company, like we were speaking before, than a company or an agency.
Yes, but could you not, for example, segment it where, let's say, the first steps you outsource, and when it gets to a bit more serious, you step in and have those conversations? Because I bet, there's a lot of management of, CRM. Here's all of the leads that I've reached out. Okay, I need to redo. I don't know if you use any automation around that and so on. That can be an option as well. But I need to reach out again. I need to nudge them, and then a couple of months later, let me send another email. I feel that a lot of that is stuff that maybe could be taken by.
It definitely could. Yeah, I'm smiling because I know this. I think this is one of the challenges that comes up for me again and again, as I alluded to earlier, is that I'm not always great at like handing stuff over.
Yeah.
for various reasons or excuses we could call it. But yeah, I think you're right actually. And this does sometimes occur to me because I don't even have a fancy CRM. I don't mind telling you I have a spreadsheet, and it's not even a very fancy spreadsheet. And it's very manual. And often when I'm sort of scheduling in emails, because I do it manually, and it's fine, but I do sometimes think, oh, someone else could be doing this.
If you, speaking up, and just as a side note, I completely agree. I feel that I am my worst analytic in a sense. I can very well sit down with someone and look at what they're doing and how they're doing it and recommend how they could de-scope or hand over and so on. But when it comes to me, I feel that I'm terrible at it. In terms of CRM, if you ever want to move to one, maybe check monday.com CRM. And I'm not doing any commercial for it or sponsored or anything like that. But I started using it for the show, and it's a lot more like spreadsheety in a way. You have like tables and so on, and you can create a couple of tabs. They have this CRM version of it. It's a bit pricey, but if you wanna ever move away from spreadsheets, but not into the crazy realm of Salesforce and other
that's
things.
the thing, isn't it? It's finding what works for you. Like with all of these, whether it's how you do your to-do list or your card, all of this, it's finding the tool that works for you, because there's so many out for everything, isn't there? Whatever you want to do, there will be a tool or a system or a resource, and it's just figuring out the one that works for you. Because one of my pet hates is any sort of software that doesn't work for me. I don't know, and when I say doesn't work for me, there's not like a specific thing that means it doesn't work. But yeah, if it doesn't work for me, I just don't know. I find it really frustrating.
At the end of the day, and I've talked about this in other venues, channels, and so on, I am not biased towards tools or anti-spreadsheets or anything like that. I think spreadsheets have their place. And if you found a good rhythm with it, spreadsheets are also very powerful. You can build entire applications on top of a spreadsheet with functions and automations and a bunch of things. So, it's every tool has a purpose, and spreadsheets definitely do. So me saying, if you ever want to move away from that, maybe look at that, doesn't mean that we should be moving away from spreadsheets every time we can. No, I still use it for a lot of the things that I do. They all have a purpose. So, if you like it, and if you have a good need for it. Like for me, I think it was because it was between doing Google Sheets and Monday.com. And the reason why I went for that was because I didn't want it to create everything, because I wanted to move leads to deals, as in podcast guests, and convert a bunch of stuff. And I was like, okay, I don't want to have to do the automation and the scripting functions to move things around. So that was the reason why I went for something like this. I was wondering, how old are your kids now?
They're 10 and 7.
10 and 7. I've always been curious. I don't have kids. But I've always had this concept in my head that as a business owner, with having kids grow up, you are less and less over time busy with them and have more available time to work on your business. But that's just my simple-minded thinking. Is that the case? Do you feel like over the years, as they grown, you've had a bit more space for things, or it's been a constant? No, I spend the exact same time on my business and my personal life, outside kids, the same when I had them versus now.
I think it changes, if I'm really honest. And I think there are seasons where you have more time and when you have less. So when they were little, I definitely had less time. Like I wasn't working Monday to Friday set hours, for example, which I've only been since they were both in school, but they both started school in 2020, and we all know how that went. You know, there was some homeschooling involved. So yeah, I remember I was really looking forward to when they both started school full time, because I was like, yeah, then I can work 5 days a week, which I'd never done before that, because I had one child in school and then one at nursery, but I never wanted either of my children to do like full-time nursery. So I always would say I worked part-time up until they were both at school, because that's just what I wanted to, that was my choice. That's what I wanted to do. Also though, interestingly, my business, my consultancy didn't really take off until 2020 for a couple of reasons. So I mentioned I had the yoga business and I was still running that. And then I had the products business that I mentioned, and I was selling on Amazon and I was doing really well. And that was kind of what I was doing at the time. So I had people teaching my yoga classes. I was selling my products mainly on Amazon. Amazon was doing all my fulfillment. So it wasn't a very hands-on business. So I was able to work part-time, and I had small children. I'd come up with the idea for the podcast because at that time, lots of people were contacting me and saying, oh, how did you source your products? How did you get on Amazon? How did you do, various things? And I was like, oh, I'm going to have a podcast about this, and I'm going to talk about what I did, and then also interview guests, because obviously every business is different, and I'm going to share. But at that point, I didn't really have the business I have now. And that came about really during the pandemic. So I was thinking, what am I going to do when I've got more time, when both my children start school in September 2020. March 2020, I launched a podcast. About a week later, there was a pandemic. Both kids were home. What happened then is two things. One was my products started selling super well on Amazon. They'd always sold really well, but because you may not remember them, but you could only, actually you wouldn't know, that's how you would remember, you probably wouldn't know, only certain products could sell on Amazon for a while during the pandemic. They were, from their warehouses, because they were like, we have to prioritize essentials. So baby products, health products, food products was all they were taking in their warehouses. Obviously everyone's at home,
masks and everything.
Yeah. But for example, if you sold, I don't know, a coffee table on that, you probably wouldn't, but they wouldn't accept that in the warehouse at the time. It was only things they deemed essential. Because I sold baby products, they were deemed as being essential. And then more people were at home, shopping online, and my sales just went up massively. But then there were also other businesses who wanted to suddenly get online for the first time, or they wanted to get on Amazon because they were like, well, we could be selling here. And I think through this blog that I had that was fairly small, and the podcast, and I was still on freelancing sites, I was suddenly getting lots of people coming to me saying, we need to get our products on Amazon, we need to do it now, because maybe they had their products in physical stores that were now closed, or maybe they had a website but the website didn't get much traffic, and suddenly everyone wanted to get on Amazon. And that's when my business kind of started. And I did think that was great, coming back to the thing about kids, because my kids started school and both were at school in September. And I was like, well, great, because now I know where I can spend the extra hours I'm going to have. But it obviously didn't really work out like that. And then, in terms of the time, though, I would say now I probably am working more now. I have more hours to work now than I ever did. Although there's still, we still have things to deal with now, like school holidays, because when they're little, when they go to a nurseries usually run year round, but schools have quite a lot of time off. So that's still a bit of a juggle. Although I would say I've got to the age now where both my kids are old enough that, I can invite friends round and they'll play together nicely, and I can just be working in my office, and I might have 4 children in my house, but they play well. You definitely move through different phases. So I would say overall it's probably getting easier, and I probably have more time, but it's not been like a straight path to get there.
Yeah, especially with the pandemic situation, and afterwards schools coming back online. And yeah, you're right, you transition from nursery where it's all year versus afterwards in school, which have more holidays. Yeah, that makes sense. That's exactly why I was asking, because in my head is, well, when they get to a certain age and then they start growing up, getting into teenager years and so on, it feels less of a constant back and forth when they're at home and more they're on their own with their own interests and so on. So you can spend a couple of hours chewing at some work before other activities and so on. That has been my impression, in a sense. Well, I'm curious, why did you drop the product business? I don't think we've mentioned that.
No, I don't think we have. So, as I mentioned, they sold really well in 2020, like the spring, summer, and I think I sold out of a lot of stock. The problem was getting more stock because my products originally, well, they always were made in China, which was never the long time goal. It was kind of when I started and you don't know what you don't know and you're looking for where to do it. It seemed a place to go. And I'd been before the pandemic, I was in the process of moving my production to Portugal or somewhere in Europe. I was speaking with various factories about basically moving production into Europe. So a bit closer to home, maybe a bit, my quality was high, but I was thinking maybe even higher quality, but then also not shipping across the world. So, less environmental impact, all these things I was considering. I was in the process of doing that. And then the pandemic hit, and then that just completely went because all the contacts that I've been dealing with suddenly vanished. It felt overnight because factories closed down, people weren't working. I had 2 manufacturers I was working with in China. They closed down. Then when they restarted again, they obviously have a backlog, and then they were prioritizing their bigger customers and the bigger orders. So production was a problem. I had one more production run, and then shipping became an issue. I don't know if you remember, the Suez Canal got backed up with shipping containers.
Oh yeah, I remember.
So I just was out of stock at one point for such a long time because then my container with my products in got to customs, and because I didn't order big enough quantities to fill a container, I had products in a container with other people's products.
Yeah.
And my container got pulled over because there was an issue with someone else's stuff, and so mine were just sitting in, and I can't remember how long I was out of stock for, but it was a really long time. And then so I hadn't been able to sell anything, so I'd been focusing on helping other people get started on Amazon and sell their own products. Eventually all my stock came back up, and do you know what, it suddenly felt really hard. I'd been out of stock for so long, it felt like starting from zero again and building up. And I did it, and I was getting sales. But by that point, I think I'd really enjoyed working with other people, working with other businesses, helping people. After being on my own, working alone for so long, to suddenly feel like part of someone's team, to add value, all these things, I was really enjoying it. And suddenly selling my own products, which at one point had been so exciting and like, wow, people are buying things that I've made. I don't know, just... And then thinking of, I still wanted to change the production to Europe. But as I said, all the contacts I'd had had vanished, it felt like, and I was starting from scratch. Everything suddenly felt hard. And I had to think about what I wanted to do. And I was like, do you know what? The consultant side of the business, there's no outgoings because I'm working in my home.
Yeah.
I'm not even using office space. There's literally zero outgoings. I'm not like having to spend stock on cash and shipping and store.
That's quite risky.
So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to let the products sell out. They didn't sell out entirely because I did get to a point where I was like, I'm not just going to wait. In the end, the last in my inventory, this was the time, when was this? I can't remember what year it was. But anyway, I donated it to children who needed it in the end, because I was like, I can't just sit waiting for it to sell out, because once I made the decision, you know what, I'm going to wind up this business and go all in on my consultancy, I get quite impatient. And then, when I'm down to a couple of 100 units of stock, I was like, I'm just going to donate this and call it a day. I'm not going to wait and sell every last one, because I was like, when you weigh up, what you're paying in storage versus what you're going to get for the set, I just thought, I'm just going to close everything down and I'm going to go all in on this, because by that point, so maybe that was early 2021 or 2022. I'm not very good on timings, but by that point, both the children were at school full time. I had the time to work. I had enough clients coming in from freelancing sites, from people that I'd been referred to me. I was like, I have a business now. I don't need this other one.
So it didn't feel to you like pivoting in a sense, because you're already running the other business for quite a bit, and growing in it, and it was just letting go of this, which became secondary business, which was the product business.
There was a bit of an overlap, and there was definitely a time when the product business was my main income, and then it flipped.
Yeah.
And I think it was the point at which it flipped, and then the product business, there were so many challenges, and don't get me wrong, I could have overcome them, but I could see the potential with the other business, and I was like, you know what, and also being honest, the cash flow thing did make a difference, because with my products business, when I suddenly was out of stock and then I'm not making any money, that's really hard. And then from the consultancy, I could see, okay, it's a way of making money without all these overheads, because when you're selling products, obviously you're you're spending all the time on your stock, your storage, shipping, all this stuff. It just feels like you're constant, as much as you're making money, you're also constantly spending money. As I mentioned earlier, the accounting side is not my favorite, and I was just like,
who is? I feel that no one likes accounting.
It just felt simpler to have an online business. And remember as well that post-pandemic, like, online business became a term. I don't know where that came from really, because a lot of us were working online anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, actually, this just feels simpler. And I was really, and still am, really enjoying it. And I realised that I was, like I said before, I was getting much more enjoyment helping other people than I was from doing the same thing myself. I don't know what that says about me, but that's my favorite thing. It's just
mine too. That's what I'm doing all of this.
It's just great, isn't it? It's just great to feel like, okay, I've made a real difference to their business, which hopefully makes a difference to their life. And I just think that means more to me than selling my own stuff.
I think when you do services, you're also closer to how much you're impacting the customer, in a sense. Selling products, physical goods, yes, you might get comments, you might get feedback, you might get testimonials that kind of make you feel that you're having a difference, be it physical goods, be it digital products and so on. But when you're there in the room with your customer and you're strategizing and you're putting things together and you're seeing results with them, I feel that that's probably a lot more rewarding on a per capita sense, right?
Especially as I feel like my products, they're not products that are changing the world. You know, so on my podcast, I interview all kinds of product businesses, and there are people who have products that blow me away, products that really make an impact. Do you know what I mean? And mine weren't that. Don't get me wrong, they were good products, and I was excited every time someone brought one. But I feel like I could never be so excited about them, because they were variation. You know, I was selling baby blankets and towels, and they were variations of things that were already there. And yes, they were good, and yes, I believe they were great products, but they weren't, you know, they weren't having that impact. Whereas I love working with businesses where it's like, wow, this is really cool what you're doing. It's different, it's innovative, it's, do you know what I mean? I like that.
I completely understand that. You know, I didn't realize actually that was the case when the pandemic, right at the end of the pandemic, there was all of these challenges with shipping and for fulfillment and such with products, because I remember there was a shortage of chips as well, manufacturing chips and so on, and then shipping went crazy. I have a question for you. Hypothetically, if, say, none of that would have happened for your business in the hiccups, and you would have gotten your products in time, and you would have continued to sell at the same rate that you're selling at that point, where do you think you'd be today? Do you think you would be in the same position, or would have things pan out differently from these two businesses' perspective?
That's really interesting. I don't entirely know. There's a part of me that feels that if my products business could have kept going and didn't impact the consulting, as in if it was kind of ticking over, let's say, which is by the way viable, if you have all your processes in place, it might not have grown, but it might have just, kept ticking over. I feel like maybe it would have gone longer. I don't think I had the passion for launching new products. Because I still don't feel that now. Because people ask me now and again, they're like, "Oh, do you want to go back to selling things? Would you create something new?" And I'm like, at the moment, I don't have that excitement for it. Maybe one day I'll get a good idea. I'm never going to say never, and I think at some point there will be a physical product again, but I just don't know what or when, because it has to genuinely excite me for me to do it. So I can see maybe the business would have continued, but I still don't know if it would have continued until today, because I think there's part of me that likes to change and evolve and do new things. I do think I get bored easily, which is a bad thing to admit, maybe. And
Tell me about it.
That's one of the reasons I like working with other people's businesses, is because it's not mine and I'm never going to be there forever. Even I've got clients I've been working with for years. It's not the same because I don't work for them. I work with other people, and there's variety. And I feel like, I should have mentioned earlier, so the yoga business I wound up, I can't remember when my other businesses took off, I assume. I've never been afraid to kind of drop things that aren't working, or try something new. So I don't know if it would have survived. I think possibly a plan I'd had before the pandemic, when I didn't know how things would turn out, I had a vague thought in the back of my mind that I might sell it. That was something I had thought about, and possibly could have still done. So that's what might have happened. But I don't see that I would be having both now. I think I would still be in the same position now.
Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting one, because I've had situations as well, and I've been thinking, if that hiccup wouldn't have happened, where would I be? Would I have this and this, or would I only have that? So I guess these are just fleeting thoughts that you ask yourself from time to time, trying to figure out other paths. So you have a podcast that you've been running for quite a long time, and you mentioned to me that that's weekly.
Yes.
How many episodes do you have now?
Almost 200.
200.
Almost, yeah. I was funny enough, I was looking for the number last night. I'm not sure. About 190 maybe, nearly 200.
That is a lot. I'm wondering, do you get leads from it? Do you have people reaching out and say, "Oh, I watched your podcast, love it, love the conversations. Oh, and I also realized that you do this, and I have a need for your services." Do you get any of that?
Sometimes. Not loads, but sometimes. Although, I'll be really honest, I don't mind if I never do. I genuinely don't, because I started the podcast more as like a passion thing. It was something I really wanted to do. It's one of my favourite things that I do today. And if I never make any money out of it, so be it. I genuinely mean that, because I feel like that's something that I just enjoy doing so much, and I know that it gives value in other ways. So I get great reviews for my podcast, I get wonderful comments, and I get people
and you won an award. You just told me last evening that you won an award for best business podcast at the, what was it, independent podcasters or podcasts?
Independent podcast award. So that's basically podcasts that produce without a studio and producers, and
nice. Yay,
people
congrats.
like us sitting in our homes podcasting. Thank you.
So I mean, you have a lot of achievements with your podcast and milestones achieved, and that's wholesome to hear that you can run this, you're enjoying it, you don't necessarily pushing it for monetization and such. I'm wondering right now, roughly how much of your time do you have to spend on it? You told me that you started unloading stuff and so on, but what's on a weekly basis? Is it just the recording, or you do other stuff with it as well?
At the moment, it's reaching out. If I ever approach a guest, a lot of time now I get guests come to me, which is very nice. People contact me and say, can I come on your podcast? And like you alluded to earlier, sometimes they're not a good fit. Sometimes they are, because like you, I vet people. But it's a lot easier to get guests, I feel like, nearly 4 years in than it was before. That used to take time. So I do a bit of outreach. If I come across a business, I'm like, oh, I'd love to have you on the podcast. I drop an email. That doesn't take very long. And then I do the recording. So I use an automated tool to book the slot for the guest. I do a bit of preparation for an interview. Not too much, because I always want the conversation to be like how we're talking now, to be natural, where I think if I research too much into someone's bio and I know what they're going to say, I worry that I will miss a question that my listeners won't know because I already know it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I try and make a balance of knowing enough about them to have a good conversation, but not knowing so much about them that I don't ask the questions.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take, maybe that doesn't take so long. I would say a couple of hours a week at the most. I only record, I've streamlined things so much, so I only record episodes 1 day a week, unless a guest says to me, oh, I can't, I record on Tuesdays. If a guest says to me, I really can't do a Tuesday, then I can be flexible, but I try and have only 1 day a week for recording and any podcast tasks that I have to do. So sending recordings to the editor, anything really podcast related, I try to stick 1 day a week. And I do have an editor now.
Okay, I think that's a really good strategy in a sense, because you're time boxing all of that, and you know that time is dedicated to it. My next question would have been around whether you've ever had a period in your journey where you had running your business and your podcast in the same time, and you thought you had doubts, second thoughts, and thought, maybe I can't do the podcast anymore. I'm too busy. Was that ever the time, or this time boxing thing works so well for you that you've never had the thought in your head, or I need more time for work, so I should deprioritize? Because that's what happens with a lot of people, and that's why a lot of podcasts die early on, because you spend a lot of sporadic and a lot of time on the podcast, and you realize, well, I have a lot of work to do. I can't do the podcast this week. I can't do it next week, and so on.
I think I'll start by saying I'm a sort of person, if I commit to doing something, I will do it. I'm very good at, if I make a commitment, I'm doing a weekly podcast, there will be a weekly podcast.
Okay.
Time boxing is quite new. I'll be honest, and you probably can relate, is that the longer I've run a business, the smarter I've got about running a business, because I used to record podcast interviews every day of the week. I didn't used to have the automated thing. It used to be like, when can you do? Okay, I'll do Wednesday at 12, whatever it was. I kind of didn't run my diary. I let my diary manage me a bit. I wasn't doing any sort of time boxing or anything like that. It was very ad hoc. And I think because the longer I've run the business, the smarter I've got about running a business and making it work for me. I did get to a point where it was getting a bit much, and that's when I outsourced. So I have a VA who helps me with creating the thumbnails and getting the transcripts and putting, all of the, basically I now outsource on the podcast everything that isn't me speaking with the guest, whether that's having the original conversation or the recording.
That's my nirvana. That's where I'm gonna get to.
Because I kind of realized that they say that, don't they, only do the things that only you can do. And I think with my podcast, the bit that only I can do is sitting down and talking to the guest. Everything else I don't need to do. And that feels good. It's only this year, 2023, that I got to that point where I don't do anything else, because it was like things like I would get a pit in my stomach at the thought of editing the podcast. I was like, oh, there won't be one this week if I don't edit it, but I really don't want to edit it.
Have you heard of autopod.ai? So I'll send you a link if you're in there. But anyways, you said you got that sorted, but I put all of the cameras on the timeline in Premiere Pro, and Autopod just goes and switches between the cameras based on who's talking, and also having a wide shot angle and so on. So that helps me, because I was the same thing. The thought of starting a podcast in the early days and having to go through and edit and switch cameras here, do that, it just felt queasy. I'm the same. As a difference. I think the only thing that I would have still on me, aside from the sitting down and having the conversation, would be this, like just setting up the cameras, lights, because I just love that. I love the production side of filmmaking and the podcast and such. But editing, thumbnails, social media posts, all of that, I would gladly give it to someone else. And I'm in the process
Yes,
of
you should do that. I think if you're like not wanting to do it, it's just smart, isn't it? To just, and the other thing I found as well is I'm so much more productive since I'm not doing it all myself. So I have now podcast edits. We're recording this end of October. I think up until mid-December, I have episodes that recorded, edited, show notes written, ready to go, which is a really nice position to be in, because if my VA gets ill or takes a holiday or I take a break, I feel like I'm covered. There's a bit of contingency in place, and that's a really nice feeling, because I think part of the stress I had before I started outsourcing it was, if I feel sick this week, can I get an episode out? It was everything was to the wire, and I don't like working like that.
That's the other thing, because I've been recording quite a lot and quite often. Like, for example, beginning of the weekend, I felt a bit sneezy, and I was thinking, oh my God, what if I get ill? I need to record next week with Vicki, and that would be so terrible if I'm ill and I can't record. So I have that FOMO as well, and I need to be resilient. I need to be healthy, because I have too many things to do. Brilliant. Vicki, I know that you also need to get back at some point. So I'm going first, before getting into the ending ceremony and podcast ending ceremony. Is there anything that you want to ask me about my history or anything like that? It's perfectly fine if you don't have any questions or anything.
I don't think I do, because we had a really good chat. If you remember that first Zoom we had, where we had our 10-minute introduction that ended up being a lot longer. So I feel like
that's a good feedback. I need to be a bit more refrained when I introduce myself.
No, but it was good. It was great though, because I got to get a real good sense of you. And actually, I think if I hadn't had that, then maybe I wouldn't have driven to Brighton to do this with you, because I feel like if we hadn't connected, then it is a commitment, isn't it, to come and take a day and visit someone. And
and I think it over time, I feel the first time which was Ekaterina Blake, I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes, she's from Brighton, and I think that was the first time I met someone specifically for the podcast, and met up with her and had a chat, and I felt that I was a bit more awkward around talking about the value proposition of the podcast and such, my history and all of that. I mean, I've talked about that so much since starting Jigsaw that it's just second nature. But talking about the podcast, the audience, the value proposition, it felt a bit clunky. But I feel that now I'm getting quite into it quite a bit, and I'm happy about that, because I just jump on calls with various folk, be it for podcast guests or partnerships, sponsorships, things like that, and I'm able to convey the message quite effectively.
But do you think, you don't mind me asking this, but do you think that that's because you've got more comfortable with it, or do you think it's evolved to where you feel? So what I mean is, I think when you start a podcast, you might have an idea of this is what it's going to be and this is what it's going to be for. But what I guess I'm trying to say is, has that evolved for you as you've started having the conversations with people? Is it still what you envisaged, or has it moved slightly?
No, I think it is the vision that I had before starting. I think the language has evolved quite a bit. I've constantly polished to have, I was using, at the beginning, I used quite a bit ChatGPT to make me a nice phrase about this and that, so that I can position it nicer. And then from that rigid version, I started evolving the language around how I talk about the podcast and the community and the entire Misfit Founders proposition. So that has evolved. And with it, also me getting comfortable with communicating with people what Misfit Founders is.
Yeah,
at least
that makes sense. And if you don't mind me saying as well, I think it has to have evolved to be in your voice and from you rather than what you get from ChatGPT. Because I think with podcasts,
very true.
do you find that podcasts, you really get a sense of a person from a podcast, and it needs to be genuine to them?
Yeah.
Like, I think you can tell if something's scripted, for example, versus someone speaking as themselves. And I think audiences really connect with that when they hear that it's you, and not like a script. Like, I'm not saying you in particular, but I'm sure there are people who maybe go to ChatGPT and
no, I do as well. I do for work. I do here and there. I have certain video bits that are scripted, and yes, 100%. Now there are ways to make ChatGPT summarize stuff and make it sound more like you by giving it writing or speaking samples. Here's how I talk,
that's interesting.
and so on. So it kind of evolved in a sense. I still use it for certain things. If I'm in a rush, it makes more sense. Hey, here's this bundle of thoughts. Structure it and make it more concise and so on. I still find it useful, but that's for very prepared, a bit theatrical type of video content.
I
in
know
a
what
sense,
you mean.
right?
I know, yeah.
Demos, this, that. So you need to be as effective as possible, because these conversations are long form, long winded, and so on. And yes, I wanted to do that. I wanted the podcast to be as organic as possible. And I don't know if I mentioned this. I had a podcast in the past when I was running Jigsaw. It was called Startup Corner. And one thing that I found myself was I was sending questions to startup founders. And I was a bit too much in my head about what I need to ask next. Because everything was, and I need to make sure that I keep the questions answered up until this, because I need to feed in all the questions in that 1 hour span and so on. So it was too much in my head. That's why I'm doing this kind of free form, because I feel that it's so much natural and organic. And it's not going to be for everyone, because I don't know about your show, but you have people that like how you structure and the content flow, and people that don't, that prefer things a bit more compressed, more concise, or things that are not long-winded or going on various tangents. But again, it's not supposed to be for everyone.
Yeah, and I know what you mean, because I don't send question lists. I send a bullet points of these are things I'd like to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to vaguely stick to that as a structure. But I do have to say to people, I might not do in this order, because where the conversation goes, or I might have additional questions. Because what I used to do was send like, these are the questions I'm going to ask. But I stopped that when I realised that when I did that, what was happening was my guests were sometimes coming prepared with their answers. And then the conversation almost felt scripted, because I'm asking the question I prepared. They asked the answer they prepared. Sometimes I ask, sometimes when I ask follow-up questions, maybe they would talk around it. But sometimes I found people weren't then prepared for that, because they were like, that isn't a question I've ready for, even though they know their businesses. And I say this to people now, you don't need to prepare at all, because I never ask anything nasty. Same as you, I only ask things that the person will be able to answer. And if for any reason they didn't want to answer, that's never happened, but they could just say to me, do you know what, I don't want to answer that. And
no
problem.
Don't put that in, or anything like that.
And it's fine, but this hasn't happened. But I think sometimes if you try and over prepare, you actually get the quality of the conversation isn't as good as if you've done, I don't want to say less preparation, but less maybe structured. I feel sometimes
100%. I'll tell you a quick story. I had someone, and I've not published that episode, but because it was way too worse. I had someone, I sent them the questions. I went on a call, because it was remote. It wasn't like this in person. I went on a call, and while I was asking the questions, they would look off the screen and read from another monitor, and then look at the screen back up, so you could clearly see when they were talking to me versus when they were reading. So I thought to myself, I think that was one of the moments when I thought, okay, no, I'm not structuring things anymore. And the reason why I didn't start this podcast up until now is also because I was scared of the kind of like long-winded and laid back informal format of me having to go in and go through the entire setup and the entire timeline and have to edit a lot. But one, Autopod AI, so have a look. Maybe that's something interesting for yourself as well. And two, I realize when you have a natural conversation and just organically move through things, I don't find myself needing to cut.
I'll be honest, I don't cut anything out of my podcast unless someone asks, which has only happened once, or I don't know, my dog starts, that's happened to me before, it's really embarrassing. I didn't realise the dog's in the room till he starts barking. Other than very small things like that, I don't edit. As in, when I say edit, my editor, what he mainly does is stitch everything together and make it sound beautiful. But I don't I don't edit what people say or what I say. Even if I misspeak, I just think, you know what, that's how I speak. We'll keep that in.
It's your natural self in a sense.
Yeah, and when I listen to podcasts, my favorite type of podcast is this type of podcast. Two people talking, it's conversational. I don't know, I find it really comforting to listen to this sort of podcast because I have been watching yours and I feel like it's just nice. I think sometimes you get more from hearing people having a conversation than you do from someone talking to you directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's not for everyone.
No.
Again, like there's people that prefer this, and then there's people like, oh, get to the point, and can you just, this question, can you answer it first and then go and talk about the story, the extra stories and so on. It's okay. Watch talking heads in a sense, if that's the case. They have a purpose in a sense as well when it comes to content. Right. Let me get the little gift. Just don't look. I need to ask you the 3 last questions that are flash questions. Okay. Right. So I usually have a ending ceremony, which involves 3 questions, flash questions. Number 1, what is a quote that you live by?
Done is better than perfect.
Done is better than perfect. I've heard variations of this, but this seems so much cleaner.
Yeah, I like to be efficient with words. But yeah, when I say that, by the way, I don't mean like I don't try and do good quality.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to clients. When it comes to clients, it will be perfect. But I just feel like you can procrastinate so much or not do things because every tiny thing has to be right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just sometimes feel like do like your 80% website or your, you know what I mean? And then make it better later.
Yeah.
But I think with a lot of things, like with my spreadsheets, maybe I'll move to a nice CRM at some point. But you know what? When I got started, rather than spending hours, what CRM should I use? I'll just set up a spreadsheet and I'll use that until I don't anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, I'm much better if I just make a decision, do something, even if imperfectly, than spending hours looking for the best way to do something. Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's something there. Do 80% in the early days, and then the rest 20% either when you really have to or when you have the luxury of time and resources to do so.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the rule in a sense. So really good quote. Now, second question, a book that impacted your personal or professional life.
Okay, I'm hoping this is one that no one's ever said. It's called How to Start a Podcast by Kristen Meinzer. And the reason this impacted me is, one, when I read this book, I decided that, okay, I could start a podcast. That honestly was the book I read that made me go, oh, okay, this could start a podcast. But also it planted the seed for my own book, because I'd always wanted to write a book, but I just worried about, I've got all this content and how will I put it all in a book? Because I felt like the subject, my book is about how to create a product, and I felt it was so big and things change so much, and how could I write a book about it? And then I read this book about starting a podcast, and I noticed how smart she was, that it gave you enough detail to help you, but not so much detail that something would be obsolete in a year. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
There was nothing really in there that could date, no recommendations of
It's quite
microphones
evergreen
or text.
type of feedback.
And I was like, this is really smart. And I think reading that book, like I said, was the catalyst for me to think I could start a podcast. But that's where the seed for the book came from, because one of my objections to writing the book, because I'd thought about it for a long time, was just that. There's too much and things change too much. And then I was like, okay, this proves to me that you can write a book that's really useful without giving every tiny little thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I need to read that. So it's How to Start a Podcast by.
I think it's Kristen Meinzer, and I don't know how you spell that.
Okay, I'll look it up. Or if you have a picture of it, that would be great.
Picture.
And last question: what is a good habit that you advocate for?
I think doing things consistently. I think if something's important, you need to keep doing the thing. So as a real example, I'll give you as a real example, I work on my podcast every week. So every Tuesday I do something podcast related. Even if I'm not recording an episode that day, I might be looking at the schedule. Do I need to find more guests, or where's this edit? And with like looking for new clients, every day I might send an email to somebody or follow up on a proposal, or I just think whatever it is, I just think the things that are important. Or when I was writing my book, I wrote every day. Some days I might only write 100 words, but I sat down to write every day because I feel like once something becomes a habit, whether you say I do this every day or every week, it becomes what you do, and then you start making progress. Whereas if you say, I want to write a book and I'm going to write a little bit this week and then I'm going to put it down for a month or whatever, I think you're a lot less likely to get where you want to be. For me, now this might not work for everybody and I'm fully aware of that, but that's a habit that's really paid off for me. If I decide something's important, I just keep at it.
I think it's a repetition and getting into the habit of it. I think it's also investment, because if you do something constantly, let's say weekly or on periodic bit, and you constantly do it, you get to a point of no return in a sense. You've invested a lot of, this goes back to certain things that I was talking about, project management and such, like risk reward type of thing. You also need to know if things don't work out, or if you don't feel good about it, or it doesn't bring you anything, when to cut it and call it quits and so on. But in a sense, I find this with myself. Repetition and consistency is good because it gets me into the habit. And at one point I do it, in a sense, without feeling much the pain of doing something. But it's also the investment. Because you invest in that area, at one point you take it a lot more serious because you've invested in it. So I think it's both. But yeah, really good. Thank you for doing this with me, with a stranger from matchmaker.fm. And also thank you for driving to Brighton. I want to give you your formal official membership into the Misfit Founders guest group.
Oh, thank you so much.
You get a coin. It says that you're a misfit.
Thank you.
It has the number of the guest, so you've been guest 18 so far.
Thank you.
And on the other side is the Misfit Founders logo as well, and it has like a little kickstand, so you can put it in your wherever you want.
Put it on my desk. Thank you so much.
No worries. Again, thank you so much for doing this. Really interesting and amazing story, and would love to continue the conversation. Maybe have you in the future. Maybe I'm not building any products currently, but maybe in the future I can make an appearance on your podcast as well.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Awesome, thank you.